Hello, everyone. We are Group 7. That includes Brian, Kimberly, Elaine, and myself, Michelle, and we are going to be presenting about prevention and interventions on our current news story. So, let me get started first on the topic of the overall news story. The first is that this little girl's tragic abuse case shows independence from her father/slash caregiver that was reported through a 911 phone call that indicated that she fell over a bunk bed. The father's girlfriend called regarding that she did fall from a bunk bed and that responders need to come because it was an emergency. However, when the first responders came to the house, the girl was found in an ice bath only in her underwear, which does not correlate to a fallen bunk bed. That just indicates that they were making up a story that kind of gets off with the father and the girlfriend not taking any responsibility of what is happening throughout the scene. The first responders found that the girl's eyes were dilated and fixed. Pupils that are fixed and dilated can be a symptom of an injury to the brain from physical trauma or even a stroke. Falling from a bunk bed should not indicate those types of symptoms or anything regarding that child. A falling bunk bed would just indicate a broken arm or a broken wrist or anything, broken leg. It should not be very dramatic when it comes to dilated eyes and fixed eyes. Also, the doctor at the Child's National Hospital indicated the child was very brain devastated, which does not indicate what the injuries from a fallen bunk bed. Also, exams and more scans show that a tiny body that have been injured many places over a short periods of time, meaning that the abuse has been presenting throughout the years and it is not a one-time thing. They should have been reported multiple times, but they were never treated, which indicates that it just doesn't make sense how they finally figured out that they need to call 911. Also, her internal organs were injured and her wrists, ribs, and leg have been fractured, which does not correlate to the bunk bed incident prevented. Next slide, I am going to talk about the extent of her injuries. They're very different from examining the trauma and being inconsistent with torture and the means of child abuse. The doctor report indicates that there's been a lot going on present within her body as signs that should have been reported, especially at a child that is 5 years old. Also, indicating was that the punishments included that the child was presented was doing squats against the wall for hours. Also, a 5-year-old should not be forced to hold a push-up in a bathtub filled with hours for several. That just is not okay in any circumstances. That is physical abuse, which should have been treated before. It is very sad to see that her 6th birthday, was spent through in the hospital with machines attached to her with her little heart beating and her lungs filled with air. No one had answered her devastating state, which it is very unlikely that it hasn't been reported any time of the incidents that she has been abused by her father or by any caregiver that should have been reported immediately. No one oversees the way abuse cases end in a near death were investigating, meaning her case did not make it to an investigation because she did not die. However, it shouldn't be that a child needs to die so it can be investigated. They should be given time and even investigate small incidents that keep in a pattern. Finally, the last month, the DC police arrested the father and the girlfriend and charged them with first-degree cruelty to children. Also, federal privacy laws cannot disclose where the girl is or what has been happening to the family or what is happening to the custody of her now. The family hasn't been on the radar since. Also, sources familiar with the case said that the family is in a typical or well-known case to city social workers. The alleged abuse hasn't been reported in a case that may have been a vigilance and people should have said something, meaning that it hasn't been reported and nobody's going to do anything about it until she dies or ends up in a news story, which should not come to the fact. She's a little girl that's been asking for help, and it has just come to many terms that she needs to be advocated for. It doesn't matter if she's hanging on a hospital bed or in a machine that is breathing for her. She's still alive and she deserves to be treated equally to get the justice that she needs from her father or/slash caregiver. Thank you.
The prevention strategy chosen is called the Child Abuse Prevention Climate Survey. It's an exploratory study that used randomized telephone surveys to two different counties, one in Lane County, Oregon, and one in Whatcom County, Washington. And it's designed to identify public beliefs about child abuse and neglect actions, to provoke self reflection, promote local conversation, and to inform the development of a countrywide child abuse prevention plan. Now, it's grounded in the assumption that because a community presents these solutions, they are much more likely to support them and to sustain them. And the research questions range from whether participants believe child abuse and neglect were a local problem in their local community to the degree to which participants believe child abuse prevention is their personal responsibility. This slide here shows us who were the participants. There was 721 participants, and the first theme of the question was individual and collective actions that would give child abuse and neglect preventions the best chance for success. The second is what participants would expect to see in a local child abuse prevention effort to have faith in its effectiveness. Now, 61% of these participants identified as female. Their average age was 55.7, and their median income was 35,000 to 49,000. 31% of them identified as mandatory reporters, and 76 were a primary caregiver for a child at some point in their lives. Now, the participants emphasized that awareness raising, education, broad public support, and the value of locally developed plan, credible leadership, and a reliable follow through were really important. That participants' beliefs and recommendations were mapped to existing and promising child abuse prevention frameworks, and implications for prevention planning were outlined. Here we see the findings from these two questions that were asked. The first one was, what do you believe is the single most important thing that must happen to significantly reduce child abuse and neglect in Lane County or Whatcom County? Now, there was a couple answers. The first was education, second was awareness, reduce substance abuse and poverty, access to services, support, and lastly was that they didn't know. And a sub-theme that resulted from the first question was education for parents. The second is, I would be in full support of a local effort to significantly reduce child abuse and neglect if I was sure that it would work, that it would have good leadership, that it had community involvement, and that children actually get help. Overall, what we find is that the article shows that prevention efforts designed to broadly engage the general public, therefore, should educate the public about the spectrum of prevention, the features of primary prevention, and complementary opportunities that can occur when primary, secondary, and tertiary strategies are aligned. Thank you.
Hello everyone, today I'll be talking about some of the limitations that can be found in the prevention article. So some of the limitations are the sample did not fully represent the local communities from which the sample was drawn. The sample overrepresents women. It underrepresents people who could not complete the study in English. It does not represent a youth perspective. Racial identity data were not collected and are not known. The data was collected over the phone on one occasion with each participant, which does not allow for iterative development of questions or for deeper exploration of participant perspectives. The survey method did not allow for a review of findings with participants, and the open ended conversations relied fully on self report. So, these are some of the limitations that can be found in the article. So, describe in detail what the intervention strategy is. This study applied a cross sectional qualitative design using a phenomenological approach. Phenomenology is an approach to qualitative research that focuses on individual lived experiences and subjective interpretations of those experiences in order to distill the essential features of a certain phenomenon. Non probability, purposive sampling methods, both criterion sampling and snowball sampling were used in this study. Data were collected through individual interviews that were guided by a semi-structured interview guide. The interview guide was developed with consultation and feedback from an external consultant who is an expert in child maltreatment. The interview were conducted in rooms and participants' agencies and lasted between 30 to 40 minutes. Who was given the intervention strategy? So 27 interviews were conducted with clinicians to examine the critical components that should be incorporated into interventions. 4 primary themes were captured from practitioners' perspective. The first being therapist characteristics, second, caregiver characteristics, third, community influences, and fourth, post-treatment support. And the findings of this study benefit the improvement of future clinical interventions to promote the resilience of maltreated children. And now I'll pass it over to Kimberly.
Hi everyone, my name is Kimberly. I'm going to be going over the main findings and the limitations of the intervention strategy. So the findings of this article were that it supported that competent and skilled practitioners can successfully help children address the trauma associated with child maltreatment experiences by effectively building a safe and trusting network as well as a reliable social network. The findings showed that the practitioners most commonly used trauma-informed approach and the strength-based future-focused approach. Both of these approaches aim to promote the resilience of maltreated children, and it effectively helps children recover from their difficult situations. So the limitations of this study were that since thematic analysis is a relatively new qualitative analysis method, researchers may question the insufficient supporting literature compared to grounded theory. And also the diversity of the participants is limited because all the participants were recruited from 2 community-based agencies in 1 county in the Midwest. These were our 3 resources that we used for this presentation, and thank you for listening.